Welcome to the Thyroidless Life podcast with me, Dr. Rebecca Warren. This podcast is for you if you've been diagnosed with a thyroid disorder, think you might have a thyroid disorder, or healing after thyroidectomy. I'm doing this podcast because of my own personal health journey of being diagnosed with thyroid cancer, getting my thyroid cut out, getting high-dose radiation, and being left with no answers when my health started to deteriorate quickly. It wasn't until I drew a line in the sand that my health transformed, and now I've dedicated my life to sharing this information so others don't have to go down that same path. My hope is that you never feel alone on your health journey and that you understand how incredible your body is, that it's not working against you, it's working with you, and it wants to be well. So today's episode is a special one because I am sharing a session from our Thyroid Inner Circle membership community. I'm removing the veil so all of my listeners can see what a teaching session, which is just one aspect of the entire community, but for you guys to get this really important information. Now, this topic is a really popular one nowadays, and it's really important that if you're considering this, that you understand the foundations, you understand the importance of doing it the right way, especially when it comes to your hormones, like your thyroid hormones. So that's what we're going to go into today. And I know we have a lot of new listeners and subscribers to this podcast, which I love that. But if you listen to today's episode and you are interested in joining my Thyroid Inner Circle membership community, the doors are open. This past week, I did a Thyroid 101 Labs webinar for my email subscribers. So side note, if you have not joined my newsletter, do so. It's a lot of really great information and webinars and things sent straight to your inbox. So you can join at drrebeccawarren.com. But because we had that webinar, I opened the doors to my Inner Circle community to new members. And so if you listen to this and you want to join, the doors are open right now. And on top of that, if you'd like to get 50% off your first month to check it out, you can use the promo code half off. I know, super creative, but heck, at least you won't forget it. So half off that first month, and you can join while the doors are open. Now, if you're listening to this episode after this time period, just join the wait list, please, because once those doors reopen, you will be the first to know. So let's go ahead and jump in. I'm really excited to share. I will say one last thing. This is one in a series of teachings that our members have had. So we do talk about feasting and functional nutrition and nutrition for hormones like thyroid hormones, sex hormones. If you do join the community, you will have access to all those previous teachings. But I want to let you guys know that because fasting is just one piece of a greater puzzle that you have to do it all together to get the most benefits. But today's episode is really going into how to set yourself up for success when it comes to fasting. And it's with my special guest, Dr. Nathan. So let's go ahead and jump right in. All right. So we got a special guest here, Dr. Nathan. We are going to be going in to all things fasting. And you're probably like, what? You're making us eat all this protein and good, healthy fat and make sure that we're well nourished. And now you want to talk about not eating? Well, because I am, and we were discussing this before, we were setting up for this call. I want you guys to understand the feast-fasting-feast cycle. That is the best way to get the most benefits from your fasting techniques, especially as women and when it comes to your hormones. And so I think it's really important for you guys to understand the best way to set yourself up for success, what's happening during the fast. And, a good friend of mine, great colleague is Dr. Mindy. I know a lot of you guys listen to her stuff, have read her stuff. She's one of the leading, experts right now for fasting for women. But one thing that I think is really interesting to distinguish very broad information that should apply to a majority, but doesn't always. And that's the one thing you have to remember when you're looking at all of this fasting content is understanding that it could apply, but it could not apply. And we are a unique group with our thyroid hormones, sex hormones, what our health goal is. So just being aware of where you're at, what you have going on, and just understanding the purpose and how to tweak things. And of course, as you guys are implementing these techniques, I am here, the Facebook group, Q&A, to make sure that if anything pops up, if you have any questions about things, that you guys ask it. Now we're going to go in. I got a few questions I did post on the Facebook group that I was going to talk about this. I'll try to do that next time a little bit earlier. I did do it yesterday evening. So we did get a few questions in the group that I'm going to touch on throughout today's meeting. And if you guys have any questions, you can just send it into the chat and we can help you guys understand fasting better for your situation.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about why to fast. Autophagy is incredible. And I think we're going to see a lot more, especially a lot of us that have had like that. Well, I think almost every single, thyroid dysfunction, whether it's cancer, whether it's Hashimoto's, whether it's just growth, there's going to be an immune system component to it. And I think fasting, especially if we utilize it as a good technique, I think we can see some really incredible things on resetting the immune system, especially when it comes to thyroid hormone health. But why do we want to fast? One really big thing is autophagy.
I think when you're looking at autophagy, I think it's obviously the definition is self-eating, right? So the body is breaking down damaged parts of itself, which I've always found fascinating, right? Like from a clinical standpoint, but also just from like a design standpoint, like how unbelievable is it? There's no machine on the planet that's made that when you put it through stress and give it no input, that it doesn't either shut down or get worse, right?
Incredible.
But the human body is not that way. So you can give it nothing and yet it produces a good result, right? Like you're able to break down damaged parts of itself. And I think that's where we start getting into how amazing and intelligent our body is when we're talking about the body doesn't just start breaking down good tissue, right? That's not what autophagy is, especially initially. Maybe long-term, if you go too long and you don't listen to the signs of the body, you don't stop your fast when you're supposed to, but at least initially the body's going to start breaking down, things that it didn't need to begin with, right? So it's going to break down old immune cells. It's going to break down damaged tissue. It's going to start breaking down scar tissue. It's going to start breaking down, these senescent cells or zombie cells that you may have heard of that are basically just, overwhelming the body. Body's not, able to get them out.
Zombie cells are what specifically, just in case if someone hadn't heard it?
They're basically just cells that were supposed to go through apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. But because of the toxic load of the body, the constant exposure to everything known to man, the body's just overwhelmed. They can't get rid of it all at the same time. So these are just useless cells kind of floating in the body that take up energy and space.
And one thing I do want to talk about is that especially when there's an autoimmune component and we know there's antibodies, even if you've had your thyroid removed, a lot of you guys don't know if you had antibodies because your doctor didn't test it. One thing is how you can have these old memory cells.
Yes.
And if these old memory cells that are programmed to attack the thyroid tissue, which by the way, doesn't just attack the thyroid, it's a whole body issue, right?
It's a systemic issue.
But if you have these memory cells that are not dying off, that are not being cleared out, you have these types of cells that are creating a burden on your body. So the autoimmune thyroid component, that can be a really big reason for why you would want to fast.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's very few autoimmune conditions that I don't use some fasting for because of that component. So clinically, I like to think of it this way, that, if you have think of these like old mature immune cells that are still in the body, like these are ones that have learned the dysfunction of the body, right? Like they've been in a, for some of you, they've been in a diseased environment, right? They're trying to do the best that they can, but these are exhausted, dysfunctional, used to a diseased environment. So what we want to do is we want to get rid of those, right? We want to break those down. We want to get rid of those. And then again, the intelligence of the body says, okay, we've gotten rid of these. Now we're going to create what are called naive immune cells. Now, I know that the word naive makes it sound like, in our language that's not a good thing, but it's actually a great thing because now if your body's in a healthier state, you put new immune cells in that healthier state, it learns a healthy environment, right? So you can start to see how you can chip away at this thing over time, where it gets a little bit healthier every time. You're getting rid of these old immune cells, and then boom, you've got new ones. And each new immune cell that comes in is in a healthier environment. Eventually, that means a healthy you, right?
Which
and
is,
immune cells stop attacking.
yeah, and that's why we worked on, we're creating this good, healthy feasting state where we have protein, and we'll talk about that, how that comes into play. But one thing I think is really important too, when we're talking about all of that, is we also know that fasting helps with mitophagy,
Yes, yeah.
mitochondrial, and I'll have you jump in that. But I think this one is going to be an important one, because for those of you guys that have had your thyroid removed or have had thyroid cancer, thyroid nodules, there's this, the cancer aspect, right? And he's going to talk about the cancer in the mitochondria and why this is important. And we're going to go back to like high school biology, right? Yeah. Talking about the mitochondria. But that's one thing I remember when I had my thyroid removed, I was just kind of afraid of, like, how did this happen? Like, how did I go to my doctor's office? I was 19 years old, I was young. How did I go to my doctor's office not really having apparent symptoms, and all of a sudden I have cancer? Well, we're bombarded by stressors, chemical, emotional, physical stressors that impact our mitochondria and destroy our mitochondria. And that the mitochondria is going to be a big reason for thyroid cancer, for all cancers. So when we're looking at mitophagy, fasting can be a really powerful tool with that.
Yeah, I mean, my mitochondria dealing with, the energy of the cell. When you look at cancer, at least one leading, and I guess you would have to still call it a theory because it's science, right? We look at science, we're supposed to try to disprove it,
Yeah.
and all this. But I would say probably, the leading idea behind, when you look at cancer, really almost all chronic disease, there's a mitochondrial component to it, if not the primary component to it. But the mitochondria, especially when you look at cancer, we know that it kind of adapts to this like no oxygen state and this kind of fermentation type of environment within the cell, which again leads to a lot of damaged mitochondria. Remember, mitochondria are involved in ATP production, energy production, but it's also involved in respiration, cellular respiration, and in the way that we're utilizing oxygen in the cell. So we want these healthy mitochondria, right? And if you think about it, the most important parts of the body are the richest in mitochondria, which should let you know the importance of mitochondria, right? The brain, the heart, the testes in men, the ovaries in women, like the eyes, so some of the most important essential parts, you cut those out, you either die or your whole life falls apart, right? Like these are vitally important. So we want those mitochondria to be as healthy as possible, but we also know that we live in a world that is constantly damaging mitochondria, okay? And so you look at, for example, we know toxins, we know that anti-nutrients or certain chemicals that are in foods. We know that, radiation, the constant exposure to cell phones, Wi-Fi, 5G, all that stuff. We know these things damage our mitochondria over time. So kind of like what we talked about with damaged tissue, the body goes through mitophagy when you're fasting, and you're breaking down those damaged and dysfunctional mitochondria. And then what does the body do? It comes back and it says, ooh, we're going to produce, new mitochondria, right? And again, the healthier you get the body, all of a sudden, just like with the cells, now you're becoming a healthier individual because you're putting these mitochondria into a healthy state, which equals proper function, not dysfunction. So mitophagy, is vitally important over time. I just want to mention real quick before I pass it over to you. This is why, one subgroup of people that actually use fasting, kind of more in our modern world before it caught on to a society was mountain climbers, right? Because before they would go and like climb Mount Everest or climb K2 or climb these areas that have less oxygen, they realized, oh my goodness, if I have a plethora of mitochondria, like more than the average human being, if I create healthy mitochondria, the better my body internally is going to be able to utilize the oxygen that I do have.
Yeah.
And you see this better energy production. So mountain climbers, Navy SEALs,
Isn't that also
right?
what kind of like doping is too, is like creating like a form of doping is creating more
mitochondria.
mitochondria?
Yeah, and you can hack it now, right? Too,
Yeah.
like which we can maybe go
Well,
over. But
fasting
yeah,
is a hack.
fasting is a hack. Yeah.
And I want to add this too. Let's talk about how the mitochondria comes into play with hormone balance, right? Especially when it comes to your thyroid. So our goal, our end goal is to have adequate hormone levels, adequate what? Free T3 and reverse, like adequate amounts of reverse T3 so that the body can have ATP production. It's the T3 that gets involved in all this mitochondrial function, this free T3 that helps produce ATP. So a damaged mitochondria, Dr. Rebecca, I don't have a thyroid. Why? Why don't I still feel good even though I'm on T4, T3 and I'm within range? Or I have this dysregulation within my thyroid. I might have more reverse T3, but my free T3 is low. What is going on here? Well, you might have enough of that free T3, but you're not utilizing it. You're not able to process it. You have all this damaged cells. You have all these damaged mitochondria where you're not creating efficiently the ATP that your body needs. So I didn't warn you guys, we're going to get into this little sciencey biology, but you have to, I always say over and over again, if you can understand the foundation of why you're doing what you're doing, then you can do it the right way. And when you read information or misinformation about things, then you can be like, that's not right. Because there is a lot of misinformation about fasting, about not doing it if you have thyroid hormone issues. It can destroy your thyroid and all of this. But if you understand the true foundation, the principles of fasting, you should not be moved by the misinformation that you might come across.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think that's why you got to look at not only the science of it, but then we also have to look at it from a logical perspective, right? Which is why we talk about, you're talking about feast, famine, feast. Well, logically speaking, we want to break down damaged tissue, right? Break down the damaged parts of ourselves. But then what's the point of breaking down the damaged parts if we don't have time to rebuild, repair, regenerate, right? So, that's just from a logical standpoint. And then the third component we like to look at it from is an ancestral standpoint. And fasting has been a part of just about every civilization, tribe, religion that's ever existed on the planet, right? I mean, and even in the tribes and civilizations that didn't want to fast, they were forced into fasting. So we know that adaptation happens. So guess what? Our genetics adapt, right, to this idea of having to fast, whether it's change in seasons, change in environment, issues with, not being able to hunt well, fish well, not finding and foraging for wild plants and those type of things. So the adaptation phase has made our body say, hey, fasting is needed at times, right? That in between. But that's part of the reason I think, you educate on the feasting part first.
Yes.
Because in our society right now, right, with all the trends and all the social media and everything, like people have now started hearing about fasting. And at least from a clinical perspective, you may see it different, but I see where my patients are almost they're fasting too much, and it's like, whoa, we've got to have this balance here and know when to use fasting appropriately.
That's the thing. Like one of the biggest things that I have found through the years, thank God I do food diaries and I look at nutrition, is that women can tend to undereat. And they've done it chronically so much that their hormones, their cortisol, their leptin, their ghrelin has now adapted to this like rushing lifestyle, this fast lifestyle where you think you don't need to eat more, but it's because you've been eating little for so long that the body is undernourished. And that's one thing that I thought was really interesting about, I remember reading an article a few years ago about how America, we hear about, malnourishment in other countries and how America is such a unique situation because we have an overabundance of food and malnourishment. We're still malnourished with
high calories, sometimes high calories, but empty, right?
Empty calories,
no nutrition within it. Yeah.
And so for a lot of women, we are under like nourished. And I was talking to him about this because I was like, do you see this? Dr. Nathan works specifically with men and children. We don't do fasting with children, but you do this with men, right?
Yeah.
But one thing I told him, I was like, how do you do, like, how do you see how, like, your clients react to like 3 to 5 days fast? And he's like, oh, they don't do as great on 5 day fast. I was like, what's crazy is that I may have met one woman in the last 5+ years, one out of hundreds of women that I've worked with that maybe didn't do great on a 5 day water fast. All of them tend to not only just do good, but they want to do it more. I want to fast more. Like all of a sudden their pain is gone and they're feeling better. And so when they come off that fast, they want to do another fast and they want to do a 7 day fast. And I'm like, whoa, slow down. I find that for women, it's easier to be more restrictive than to be like the opposite.
Yeah,
right?
I think
Like
so.
you can be more restrictive in the nutrients and fasting and all of that. And that's detrimental because if you are chronically in a breaking down autophagy state, then you will continue to break down and you're going to have the opposite effects. Your thyroid hormones are going to be dysregulated. If you have a thyroid, it's going to get destroyed. Your progesterone is going to tank. Your estrogen is going to go wonky. Your cortisol. And then you come across a post that says, oh, women shouldn't fast, or you don't have you have a thyroid issue, don't fast. And then you're like, oh yeah, it's because of that. No, it's because you haven't re-fed. And we're going to go into that refeeding period. That's why we, again, worked on protein and fat. But I want to say, before we go into refeeding, one of the things that you can see where this first section is going to be focused on the why. The second half of today's meeting is going to be how do you do it? We're going to go into those logistics. But let's talk about what happens when you're fast with T4, T3 and reverse T3. Okay, because this is one thing, and I've been talking about this, and I've educated a lot of practitioners. Dr. Mindy and I talked about this on her podcast. Ben Azadi does Keto Camp. I taught, Dr. Pompa's group. I've talked about this a lot through the years because what ended up happening is, number one, I've done fasting. I have done fasting and functional ketosis, like a paleo version functional ketosis. I would say since 2009.
Yeah.
Years are a blur now. So however long that is.
Yeah.
Right? 2009.
2009.
Yeah, 2009. However long that's been. And it was a game changer for me, especially for me being on thyroid meds. I found that I needed less thyroid med to be optimal. It was incredible, right? So I've done it. But then it came when, fasting really started kind of picking up the last few years. I've started seeing more and more people say, don't fast if you have a thyroid issue, don't fast. And I was like, that's just very, very strange because what I was seeing in my office and in my virtual consults is I was seeing people whose doctors weren't giving them right direction before they came to see me that decided to start doing fasting and started to do protein and well nourishment with protein and fat. And they would come in to see me and their metabolism, like they were hypothyroid, like their thyroid, even when they get out of fasting and out of ketosis, they weren't on enough thyroid meds post thyroidectomy, for example, but they were losing weight, they were having energy, their hair was growing. And so what I was seeing was that fasting was actually helping these women when they were refeeding appropriately. But why is it that you might hear that fasting might not be a good idea? Because fasting is a stressor. Well, the reason why is that we can't see through studies and like fasting studies or caloric restrictive studies that T4 conversion will go down. Okay. So we see these studies and we're like, oh, in these types of situations, your conversion from T4 into the active T3 down regulates. And so people are taking these studies and they're like, well, look at this. You already don't have enough T3 and now you're going to fast and now your T3 is going to go even lower. That's problematic. Don't do it. But these studies never said it was a bad thing. They just were pointing out what was happening because you see that same thing happen as someone loses weight. If we see someone's inflammatory markers go down in studies, if we see them losing weight, if we see them on, a trajectory where their insulin is getting better, their glucose is getting better, we can see a decrease of T4 to T3 conversion. Does that mean that's bad? Does that mean they shouldn't lose weight? They shouldn't, have better insulin balance? No, it means that the need for conversion has gone down. And what I've found is with fasting, especially if you're refeeding and you're becoming fat adapted and utilizing good quality protein, good quality fat, we do utilize carbs in there as well for the thyroid. And we've talked about that and we'll do that in the Q&A. But what I've found is that T4 to T3 is insulin dependent and it also responds to carbs. So if you don't need to process all these carbs and you're not having all this insulin, there's less of a need of T3. What's really cool too is that a lot of times when you're fasting, you're seeing that need not just for T3, but just how would you say your energy.
Energy diversion.
There you go.
Right?
Thank you. Yeah, it's you're not as
80% of your energy is involved in digestion, right? So if you, I mean, again, this is one of those logical standpoints. If you are not using 80% of the energy you normally use on a daily basis to break down food, assimilate that, turn it into living tissue, then you can now utilize that energy for something else, right? Like that energy doesn't just disappear, right? Like it doesn't just go away. Energy is energy. That means there's a certain amount that's in the body. But if you don't have to use it, right, then you are able to divert that to some other area of the body. In this case, the ability to have cellular energy, the ability to upregulate mitochondrial function, the ability to support even adrenal function or liver function or gut function. Like all those things start to happen, which equals energy diversion. You're using it in different areas.
See, this is why I love doing calls with you because I'll have a brain fart and you're like, yep, I know what you're talking about. Let me pick up here. But that's exactly it. But this is also the reason why, if you're chronically fasting without signaling to your body that you're not in a famine, why then fasting can destroy your thyroid, can make it difficult to find a right balance if you're on thyroid meds. Because when you're restrictive for too long, when your body is giving you, your body will give you the signs, your body will stall. You'll start to see, I've had people say, oh, my hair is falling out. I feel, X, Y, and Z. Like I'm not seeing the benefits anymore. Your body's smart. It's going to let you know. And most women will just push through because they say, I have to fast. I have to do I have to do these things when your body's like, no, ma'am. The healing that you saw, the weight loss that you saw, the hair growth that you saw, the digestive changes that you saw wasn't because of the food. It wasn't because of a supplement. It wasn't because of a med. It was because your body was created to heal.
It was adapting.
It was adapting and it healed. And now when you add in other things or, start feasting again, your body will continue to heal, but it'll also continue to rebuild. So it's really important that if you go long term, then your body will signal to your thyroid that, oh crap, we're in a famine. It's time to conserve energy. When your body gets chronically stressed out because of chronic restriction in regards to your nutrients, chronic restriction because you're fasting without feasting, what your body's going to say is, we're in a famine. We have a hierarchy of needs when it comes to survival. It's going to start shutting down the thyroid. And one of the big red flags I see is when that free T4 starts to tank.
Yeah. And I was going to mention another, idea as well, that to why you don't need as much thyroid hormone when you are fasting. And this is when I see even in my men that I'm working with as well, is that you also get better hormone sensitivity, right? Because there's a couple components of this that happen. One, your body starts to break down oxidative damage and free radical damage. Remember, what really damages your receptors for your hormone that's sitting on that cell membrane are primarily things that oxidize that membrane, right? So, obviously over the years, things like a diet high in sugar, we know that, the toxins we're exposed to damage those receptors. The constant secretion of a hormone, right, damages the sensitivity of those receptors. So when you're fasting, you actually start to heal the cell membrane and break down the oxidative damage. And those receptors begin to become more sensitive and you start to produce more of those receptors, right? Which is a beautiful thing. And the reason I know this, right? And in all honesty, I don't need 1,000 studies to show it to me, because where I see it in my men, which I always find interesting, is my primary goal when they come in with low testosterone is I don't immediately start to raise their testosterone levels. What I try to do is make them more sensitive to the testosterone they're already producing. And you know what's funny? Their first like line of blood work after their initial blood work, they may not see hardly any change in that total number, but they feel a million times better. They're losing weight, they're building muscle, their vitality is back. And they're like, this doesn't make sense because my number didn't raise. I'm like, yeah, your number didn't raise yet, but you're now utilizing what the body's already making. So you may be at a 350 with your testosterone, but you feel like a man that's at its 700-800. And then after that, then you start to see the numbers start to go up. But that sensitivity factor to those receptors is vitally important, and especially with thyroid as well, right? Because
Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
receptors in many different areas of the body.
And you know what's crazy is like we see this, like we understand this when it comes to diabetes, you know, like the cell receptor sensitivity. That makes sense. You hear doctors talk about it, doctors get it for that, but you're not going to get it for other hormones, like not just insulin. What about T3? What about estrogen? What about progesterone? This applies overall. And I will say that's why. And now we're going to get into the how to. And I know we got a question here about how long, like when can I start fasting? And we'll talk about how to do that too. So I'll answer that, Becca. But that's why it's really important to understand that I have shared this previously, but it's important that for you to know that if you are on thyroid meds, either post-thyroidectomy or you have a thyroid disorder, what I have found is that a lot of times, because might be some inflammation, blood sugar issues or whatever, I found a lot of people tend to be a little bit higher on their thyroid meds than where they need to be to make up for the fact that it's not efficient at binding that hormone. So what ends up happening when they start fasting, and even when they go back into feasting, they all of a sudden are having these hyper symptoms, like they're feeling like their heart's kind of, feeling hot, kind of anxious, these heart palpitations. And what I've seen in the past is that women might freak out and be like, oh my gosh, I have hyperthyroidism. Well, no, it just means you need less thyroid meds now, which is a great thing,
Yeah.
especially like you become more efficient, especially if you need the thyroid meds. I know I have a lot of people that don't have a thyroid. If you need the thyroid meds, you're going to bind it up. I know we get a lot of new members too. If you guys will go back into the dashboard to our last session on protein, we did 2 sessions. There's a functional nutrition ebook that you guys have access to. You've got to start there before you start with what we're going to talk about, because I need to make sure that you're well nourished before we go into the fasting.
Yeah.
So let's talk about fasting. I'll go ahead and tell you this. And you, right?
Yeah.
The way we do fasting, as we lead you into really good fasting, I don't usually have adverse reactions with the women that I walk through fast. Maybe a few in the last, 10 years that I've been doing this. So if you do it this way, it can be really, really beneficial and helpful.
Well, it's like detoxification, right? If you prep the body and you prepare it beforehand, you're going to feel great, if not better, when you're doing it. It's an appropriate response. Same thing with fasting. If you prepare the body, you're going to have a much better result. Obviously, a lot of people have some good willpower and they'll just jump in and just push through the suck and all that.
Through it, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, but I don't think you have to do that. And remember, you guys are kind of this special subset right over here that have either dealt with, having your thyroid cut out, or thyroid cancer, or, thyroid dysfunction, or Hashimoto's. So you're a subset over here, which means that I think probably all of you should prepare the body before, you jump into this fasting. And that when you do jump into fasting, there's a systematic way to do it, rather than just saying, hey, okay, now I'm going to jump into a 5-day water fast, or I'm going to jump into a 7-day water fast. I think that's the wrong approach.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and talk about, first you do is you're making sure that you're getting, before you even consider fasting, you're getting adequate protein intake, you're getting adequate fat intake, and you start to kind of decrease your carbs. And again, you guys have access to that. You have the transcript, you can listen, you can watch whatever you want. But the reason why I do this is because when it's time to refeed, autophagy is the breaking down, feasting is the building up. We want to eat enough protein to create an mTOR response within the body so that once we've cleared out, now we can build up in a good, healthy way. So making sure that you understand how much protein to eat for you is going to be so important. That's how you're going to see lasting change.
Yeah.
That's how you're not going to have to be dependent on fasting, and restriction if you fast and then you nourish your body appropriately.
And I was going to say too, it's kind of a checkpoint as well. Because if you start to see the body transition into a state of like nutritional ketosis before you try fasting, and you don't do well with that, you're not ready to fast. Like it's not for you yet because your body can't even handle getting into a state of not, having this constant source of glucose and carbohydrates coming into the body. So I like to use that almost as a check engine light, right? Like if that check engine light comes on just in the initial part of getting the body into nutritional ketosis, I'm like, all right, you're not ready for this yet. We need to spend some time maybe going in and out of ketosis or, getting into ketosis a little bit deeper, like making sure the body's nourished in that state. And then we can try it again. But I like to look at it as a check engine light as well.
Okay, that is exactly true. So what are some things to keep an eye on? If you find yourself snacking, we're not there yet, right? Like you want to make sure that you're able to have 3 solid meals where your first meal and your last meal is filled with good quality protein and fat, okay? You need to be able to nourish your body in a meal and then take that break, and then nourish your body in a meal and then take that break, okay? Then once you've done that for a few weeks, and Becca, you said, how long should before fasting already in a short eating window? How many hours eating window and how long have you been on that for? Go ahead and send that in the chat there. But okay, going back, once you've established yourself there about 2 to 3 weeks, then what you can start doing is add 1 dinner to dinner fast a week. Okay, 10-hour window for 2 weeks. Oh, fasting window already in a short. Oh yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So perfect. So this is what we're gonna do. You're at this point right now. Okay, so once you've hit that, I want you to do 1 dinner to dinner fast. Okay, so you're gonna stop eating dinner on Sunday. You're gonna go the whole day to eat dinner. I want you to do that for about 2 weeks. How do you feel? Are you able to get through that dinner to dinner fast feeling good? Are you able to not feel hangry and crash and burn or feel like you have to snack? Like it shouldn't be a thing where you're like, you feel like you just got to push through. It's a thing where like, okay, yeah, I haven't gone and I'm fine and I can keep on, going.
Yeah.
You want to do that for 2 to 3 weeks. You can do that for 2 weeks. Did you want to add anything?
I was just gonna say, and usually what you find is first time you do it, it's a struggle, right? Second time you do it, it's better than the first, right? Third time you do it, it's almost like a no-brainer. And that's most. Now, I'm not saying that's everybody, but that's usually what I see, happen. And again, it's a really good way to start pushing the body, into this state of nutritional ketosis to get used to what your physiology looks like in that state, and then to prepare it to adapt, right? And so that's usually why I do the same thing. I tell them probably if they're in, Becca's state right now, I'm like, give it a good 3 weeks of only doing 1 dinner to dinner fast to see how you do with it and to see the improvements each time that you do it. And then once you hit that, now we can say, okay, now we can move on to something, maybe bigger and better because you're prepared for it now.
Yeah, so we're working out that fasting muscle. So, and then for you, you have a 10-hour window. Let me go ahead and put this too. So if you're doing a 10-hour window of eating window, is that an eating window or fasting window?
I think that's eating window. Yeah.
Window. Okay, so go ahead, start this week where you're doing it, go down to an 8-hour eating window. So before you do that dinner to dinner fast, go down to 7 to 8 hours, shoot for 7, right? See if you can do that. Then go to a dinner to dinner fast, like we talked about. And then after you've done that for 3 weeks, we can do a 3-day water fast. Now, this does not apply to my ladies that are nursing or my ladies that are pregnant, this is not the time to fast in that way. You can see some amazing benefits in intermittent fasting, doing a 16-8 window, incredible benefits, especially eating earlier in the day, amazing benefits there. So if anyone's nursing or anything, let me know. We can give you some specifics for that.
Shoot that, yeah.
Yeah, but this is when you go into that 3-day water fast. Let's talk about the benefits, like what happens at the 24-hour mark, 48-hour mark, and 72-hour mark.
Yeah. So at the 24-hour mark, I think what's amazing
Oh,
can
let me go ahead and I'm going to answer this question before we move on. So sorry, I did make it confusing, didn't I? Okay, so what I meant is I forgot to mention, a lot of you guys may not be doing an 8-hour eating window. Work on that 8-hour eating window with your nourishment. So 8-hour eating window, do that. When you're doing that dinner fast, during the week, you're still doing that 8-hour eating window.
Yeah, it's only one day a week.
1 day a week
that you're doing the dinner
to dinner fast. So
That's
you
it,
think
one day.
fast every day. No, just do the dinner. I know that one meal a day is a fasting. OMAD is like a fasting, was it the warrior fast? For women, beyond maybe 5 to 7 days, it's just not, you don't need to. We don't need to do that with our hormones. So not every day, 8-hour every day, then one day out of the week, you're going to do that dinner to dinner fast. And when intermittent fasting for 16 hours per day is a breakfast of herbal tea, paleo valley bone broth, collagen, and 1 tablespoon of coconut, a good way to break the fast. Let me see this again. 16 hours, breakfast of herbal tea, paleo valley. So this is in order to break your fast in a way that is going to create, that's a great question, in order to create a good mTOR response, elicit that mTOR response, you have to eat enough protein to trigger that. And there has to be enough leucine in that protein, right?
3 grams, right?
3 grams of leucine. What does that mean in regards to protein intake? At a minimum, we're looking at 30 to 40, like at a minimum 30 grams, up to 45 grams of protein in that first meal.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're not hitting that and you're getting 20 grams of protein, it's kind of, you're not building up, right?
Yeah.
So that first meal needs to be a good amount of protein. Secondary, get some fat in there so that you can feel full longer. So you want to make sure you're doing that.
Yeah. And I was going to say too, like, I think your idea behind like the liquid kind of idea is a good idea. I think in our modern world, we can kind of hack it and get a better result. So I would suggest, like, especially if you want to kind of like nourish the body with almost like a liquid type diet to begin that, maybe look into doing like essential amino acids, to add into it. I think one scoop is equivalent to like 26 grams. You could do 2 scoops of that.
Perfect aminos is a good way to biohack it. Get a scoop or 2 scoops in, so you can drink that and then just do whatever you regularly do.
A grass-fed beef protein, right? Hypoallergenic. We're not talking about a whey protein, especially I think when you're in like a healing state. I think it's good to use a more hypoallergenic type of protein. So you could do like a grass-fed beef protein coming from the muscle components, and that would be something you could mix into like a smoothie, or you can mix it into like even your collagen drink that you're doing. You could do like a goat's milk protein, right? That's one of the things that we use at home. And you can blend that into like a kind of like, liquid or smoothie type of idea. So I like the idea of kind of like doing like almost like a partial fast or a liquid fast, like to break it. Just make sure that you hit that 30 grams like Dr. Rebecca is talking about, so that you get the benefits of the rebuild and the repair. So you may have to doctor it just a little bit. But everything else you put in there, I think is great.
Question, I need an adrenal support in the afternoon. Should I wait to fast? Yeah, you should wait to push that dinner to dinner fast, because that's another check engine light, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times that crash can also be connected to insulin, glucose, kind of that insulin, like the glucose spike, the insulin spikes, and then when it comes crashing down, we can see that affect cortisol. So absolutely, making sure you're doing this adrenal cocktail, from that we've talked about in is it Jaro? Is really, really good. Jigsaw. And then making sure that you're, and then reactive hypoglycemia. There you go. Yeah. So We got to get more, you got to get more like foundational with the protein and fat so that you don't have that happen in that day. Once you get that protein and fat, because if you're like, I just heard about fasting, I'm going to do a 3-day water fast, you could probably do it. It's just gonna suck.
Yeah.
And we don't want it to just suck horribly for you. So work on more that foundational so you don't have that reaction happen when it comes to your glucose and insulin. I'm not usually having that crash anymore, but I still take the adrenal. Yeah, girl. Adrenal cocktail. It's high
Do
dose
it every
vitamin
day.
C. I do it every day too.
I don't do it either. I
Salt,
make my own.
potassium. Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm really bummed because I made this whole long post and scheduled it for our Facebook group, and it posted with only 2 sentences. And someone commented on it because I was showing you guys that I do my amino acids, I do my adrenal cocktail, and I do mega mucosa, and I explained why I did all three. And someone commented, "Oh, like this looks great." I'm like, "Yeah, but it didn't have the explanation." So I will repost that for you guys on that. But really great questions. Let us know if you guys have any more questions. And we'll also do a deeper Q&A fasting on our next session on anything. Okay, so going back, let's talk about the benefits, and then we're going to talk about some to-dos, the rest of the hour. But you were going in about that 24-hour,
Yeah.
48 hours, 72 hours.
So I think one of the biggest benefits of the 24-hour mark is there is some science that shows that you start to get like gut cell turnover, right? Like the gut seems to turn cells over faster than most other parts of the body. So you do see some signs of getting rid of damage like mucosal cells within the gut. And then you actually even show signs of starting like some stem cell production in the gut, right? So this is part of the reason when I have a patient with, diverticulitis or diverticulosis, IBS, Crohn's disease, things like that, I like to utilize some 24-hour fasts, especially if they have like a flare up, because they start to get the benefits of some stem cell production within the gut, and they really start to feel good. It lowers a lot of inflammation in the gut. So I think that's one of the primary components that I love about the 24-hour mark. There's other ones, obviously, you're hitting autophagy at that point. I would argue it probably happens much sooner than that. I think it probably varies by individual, but 24-hour mark, let's assume that you've hit autophagy. You're already starting to dive into mitophagy at this point as well. You're starting to get some hormone sensitivity at this point. Why? Because we know there's receptors in the gut, right? We know that there's components there. So you're already turning those over. So, hormone sensitivity is starting to happen. The 48-hour mark is where I believe we really start to see this reduction in inflammation markers. And we really start to see that component that we mentioned before with getting rid of these damaged immune cells, starting to see some of that happen. Like that 48-hour is where I start to see some of my autoimmune patients really start to turn the corner. And
That's what, yeah, same here. Like I've had, and let me go ahead and tell you, we've had all women, men, all types of background, but I'll never forget, how old was she? Our oldest fasting.
which
She
one?
was, we took a picture with her. I'm not gonna
Oh,
say her name because I don't know if
yeah.
but we took a picture with her. We
Yeah.
shared her story, and she fasted.
Yeah.
And about that, she said it was amazing. It was, I mean, usually when you're older, she was like what, 82 or
Yeah.
something. They write you off
She
like
was
you
the
have
one that came
symptoms.
off of like, what was
Yeah.
it, 17 medications or
Yeah,
something over
it was,
time?
yeah,
Wow.
because they write you off. And she was sitting there telling me everything she felt during this fast. And it's that around that time where she was like, I just felt good. You just got to get over that hump. And it was just amazing.
Yeah. And I think that's where we see that anti-inflammatory effect happen, right? Like I'll even do it in my chiropractic clinic. If I have somebody with, they're in acute low back pain, I'm like, hey, you know what? If I feel like they're ready for it, I'm like, hey, I think it might benefit you to
Yep.
try to do some, maybe a 2-day water fast while we're trying to work on the spine and work on that. And inevitably, 90% of them come
Yep.
back, their next appointment, they're like, man, I'm feeling so much better. I probably have 50 to 70% reduction in my pain.
And
Yeah.
Anne came in, someone
Oh
in our
yeah.
office, she's
Yeah.
been with us for years, and she hurt her back and she was coming in, getting adjusted. And we know that chiropractic adjustment does incredible things for the nervous system. But she had so much inflammation. And I said, Anne, maybe it's time for you to fast. She goes, I really like, Like,
What's that
why?
going to do for my back
What's it
pain?
gonna do for my back pain? I mean, she goes, I haven't been that, I mean, I drink like some Sprite. I ate like half of
Yeah,
the like
really
Goldfish
cool.
pack or granddaughters. I go, while Dr. Nathan's working on this, do this fast and let's see if it brings down that inflammation. She came back in
Yeah.
later that week and I was in the office and I said, how are you feeling? She kind of looked at me. She was like, my pain's down by like 90%, she said. I just which helps. Then now he can work on the correction without her being in all this constant pain. So it has this huge effect
Yeah.
on inflammation in the body.
Yeah. Once you start getting into the 3-day mark, it is really where I believe you start to see, like, especially towards the end of that 3rd day, some other stem cell production. You start to see like your natural killer cell count go up. Which is great, right? That's part of what helps you to fight off, infection and, whether it's viral, bacterial, as well as like cancer cells, right? Which is super amazing. This is kind of where we start to see that stem cell production start to happen, and then if you go longer, you get more of that. Now I will say, with the stem cell stuff, because again, there's a lot of articles out there, videos on, produce your own stem cells, all this kind of stuff. You realize you will not get the benefits of those stem cells if you don't refeed appropriately. Like those stem cells are basically a waste if you do not refeed when you need to refeed.
And the good news is, you guys, that's what we've been working on, how to refeed your body, right? So that's amazing. And then like
Growth
past
hormone,
that,
testosterone. I forgot about
yeah,
that
no,
too.
that's a good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Growth hormone. Oh, this is a good one.
Yeah. So 2
Growth
and
hormone's a
3,
good
I
one.
think more in the 3-day is where you start getting like this really robust increase in those anti-aging hormones, right? Remember, growth hormone, things like testosterone are important for our anti-aging type of effects in the body, for building strength and those type of things. So you really see like a robust like rise in both of those, which is why, like, when I have my patients where they're able to do this, and they can do it successfully, I usually have them like on that 3rd day, like actually start like do a workout, get some of those benefits of that, even right before they refeed.
Yeah, but if you're not working out before the fast, don't start
Yeah,
working out during the
don't
fast.
try it. That's a
Well,
more
all my
advanced
women, I will say
idea
that's
anyway.
advanced because I
Yeah,
said most of my women have to slow down and calm down and
which
maybe
makes
take a
sense.
nap
Yeah,
and just like kind of reset.
yeah.
So if you haven't worked out before,
Yeah,
don't do
don't
it.
try it. And
Don't do it.
that's an advanced thing when your body's really used to it and it can do it. I also think that also, like, when you think about fasting too, and you look at, like, especially in the religious area of things, it's usually a time for reflection, prayer, meditation, and fasting, right? Those go hand in
Yeah.
hand. So
Yes.
I think that we would be wrong to say that going into a fast is a stressor on the body, right? Like, I
A
mean,
good
it's a
stressor.
good stressor that's going to produce a good result, but it's a stressor nonetheless, which means that I do think that rest, like prayer,
Slow
going
down.
inside, slowing down. Yeah, I think it's a good
Ladies
thing.
that are working hard, ladies that have those kids, go ahead and plan that fast over a weekend. You're going to talk to your spouse, you're going to talk to your kids. This is you time. This is slowing down, this is
Yeah.
journaling. Some of the best experiences that I've had women during fast, they've journaled, they've prayed, they've really kind of recentered themselves, loved on their bodies, understood how incredible their body is, especially, coming from a medical system that's just disastrous for getting women well. But when it comes to the thyroid, you're just kind of pretty much taught that your body's this broken down machine.
Yeah.
And that's just a freaking lie. So
That is a
use
lie.
this fast to understand that healing begins up here first. So go inward, slow down, nap, journal, pray, just appreciate the body, and you can see some really, really incredible
Yeah.
stuff
I
with
mean,
that 3-day water fast.
yeah, and I would say, like, if I want to give you a what would be considered a radical idea, is this: the body never, ever makes a mistake. And this is hard to wrap your head around. Like, trust me, that's why I say radical, because it takes years for you to kind of learn this, and clinically, I know without a doubt that that's true. And let me clarify a little bit. the body never makes a mistake. It's designed to adapt. So sometimes, right, it has to adapt between a rock and a hard place, which, right? Like if I have a new patient that comes in, they're eating like crap, they're never in the sunshine, they're never moving, they're under massive amounts of stress, the body has to adapt to that, right? So does high blood pressure, is that a mistake? Or is that an adaptation so that you don't die right then, right? Is cancer a mistake? Or is it an adaptation to the environment that the body is in order to keep it alive for a few more years rather than dying right now, right?
Yeah.
So we have to understand the body doesn't make a mistake. It just adapts to its internal and external environment. So if our focus from a health perspective with fasting and refeeding and really anything across the board is to support that adaptation process, to allow the body to adapt the best it possibly can, your body has no choice but to get better because it will, because it makes the right decisions in those moments.
Absolutely.
So
powerful. Yeah. So as we wrap up here, let's go ahead and talk about, we're going to hit you guys up. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to leave a 5-star review. I love being able to see and read how this information is helping you on your health journey. And make sure to subscribe to the podcast. That way, when new episodes are live, you can have it automatically downloaded to wherever you listen to your podcast. The number one question I get asked is, how do I work with you? If you are interested in finding out more information about me and being a part of my community, go to my website, drrebeccawarren.com. That's dr.rebeccawarren.com. And you should be able to find the answer to your questions there, as well as checking out my Thyroid Inner Circle membership group, getting access to the free Thyroid Labs ebook that I have available for you, and so much more great information.